Chicago, 1983. A man sits in the back seat of a car, trusting the two men beside him. Within seconds, 3 bullets will be fired point blank into his head. He should die instantly. But Ken Eto, known on the streets as Tokyo Joe, was about to become a legend for all the wrong reasons. This is the story of the highest-ranking Asian American in the Chicago outfit's history, a man who ran illegal gambling operations for one of America's most notorious crime families. His life was defined by secrecy, survival, and ultimately betrayal. But what made Ken Eto truly remarkable wasn't his rise through the ranks of organized crime. It was what happened on that winter night when the outfit decided he had to die. Ken Eto was born on October 19, 1919, and would eventually become known by multiple names throughout his criminal career. The Chicago underworld knew him as Tokyo Joe, while some used a slur reflecting the prejudices of the era. Despite the discrimination Asian Americans faced in mid-century America, Eto managed to carve out an unprecedented position within the Chicago outfit. He became their go-to operator for Asian gambling operations, a specialized role that required both cultural knowledge and criminal savvy. The outfit, one of America's most powerful organized crime syndicates, trusted him with significant operations. This trust would elevate him to become the highest-ranking Asian American within the organization. For decades, he operated in the shadows, running illegal gambling enterprises that generated substantial revenue. But in the world of organized crime, trust is always temporary. Ken Eto's gambling operations were crucial to the Chicago outfit's criminal enterprise. He understood both the American underworld and the Asian communities where he operated, making him invaluable. His network of illegal gambling dens catered to specific clientele, bringing in steady money for the organization. The bolita games, card rooms, and various betting operations under his control represented a significant income stream. For years, Eto was a reliable earner, the kind of soldier every crime family wanted. He kept his operations running smoothly, paid the appropriate tributes upward, and avoided unwanted attention from law enforcement. His nickname, Tokyo Joe, became synonymous with the Asian gambling scene in Chicago. But every criminal's greatest asset can become their downfall. The more valuable you become, the more dangerous knowledge you possess. And Ken Eto knew far too much. The decision to kill Ken Eto came from within the Chicago outfit itself. In the world of organized crime, contracts are given for various reasons: suspected informants, business disputes, or simply knowing too much during dangerous times. 2 men were assigned to complete the job, trusted associates who could get close to Tokyo Joe. On that fateful day in 1983, Eto entered a car with these men, likely believing it was routine business. They drove to a quiet location, away from witnesses and surveillance. Then, in the back seat of that vehicle, they made their move. 3 shots were fired directly into Ken Eto's head at point-blank range. The assassins were professionals. The bullets were real. By every logical expectation, Tokyo Joe should have died instantly. What happened next defied all reasonable explanation. Ken Eto survived. 3 bullets had entered his skull at close range, yet somehow he remained alive. The assassination attempt that should have been routine became an extraordinary failure. The mobster who couldn't die had just become a legend and a massive problem for the Chicago outfit. Details of exactly what happened immediately after the shooting became part of underworld lore. Eto survived an execution that had every advantage: surprise, proximity, and professional killers. His survival wasn't just unlikely, it was almost miraculous. The botched hit would have consequences that rippled throughout the organization. For the assassins, failure meant their own death sentences. For the outfit, it meant a witness who knew he'd been marked for death. And for Ken Eto, it meant a decision that would change everything. Would he run, hide, or do something that no high-ranking Chicago outfit member had done before? Facing certain death if he remained loyal to the organization that tried to kill him, Ken Eto made a choice that would define his final years. He approached the Federal Bureau of Investigation and became an informant. This decision transformed Tokyo Joe from a high-ranking mob operator into one of the most valuable witnesses against the Chicago outfit. The FBI now had access to decades of inside knowledge about Asian gambling operations and the wider criminal network. For federal investigators, convincing a man of Eto's rank to flip was a major victory. His testimony could connect names, operations, and crimes that had remained hidden for years. The highest-ranking Asian American in the Chicago outfit was now working for the other side. This cooperation gave prosecutors ammunition they desperately needed. But becoming an FBI informant after surviving an assassination attempt meant Ken Eto would spend his remaining years looking over his shoulder. The fallout from Eto's cooperation sent shockwaves through the Chicago criminal underworld. His testimony provided federal authorities with detailed information about gambling operations and organizational structure. The men who had failed to kill him faced their own reckoning from the outfit. In organized crime, failure has consequences, and botching a straightforward execution was unforgivable. The Chicago outfit had lost both the element of surprise and a valuable operator who now worked against them. Cases were built using Eto's inside knowledge, connecting crimes to criminals who thought they were untouchable. His survival and subsequent cooperation became a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of murder and the fragility of criminal loyalty. Federal protection became Ken Eto's new reality, a stark contrast from his years as Tokyo Joe. The gambling boss, who once commanded respect in the underworld, was now the informant who couldn't be silenced. Ken Eto's extraordinary survival remained one of the most discussed events in Chicago outfit history. How does a man survive 3 bullets to the head at point-blank range? Medical experts and criminals alike puzzled over the failed execution. The shooting that should have been routine became infamous precisely because it failed so spectacularly. Some attributed his survival to poor ammunition, others to anatomical luck, but regardless of the explanation, the result was undeniable. Tokyo Joe lived when he absolutely should have died. This survival defined him in ways that decades of successful criminal activity never could. He became known not just as a high-ranking mobster, but as the man who was too tough to kill. His cooperation with federal authorities following the attempt gave his survival even greater significance. The bullets that failed to kill him ultimately destroyed more of the outfit than his death ever would have. Life after becoming an FBI informant meant Ken Eto lived under constant threat from his former associates. The Chicago outfit had a long memory and didn't forgive betrayal, especially from someone who had held such a trusted position. Federal protection provided some security, but Eto knew the organization's reach extended far and wide. His testimony had damaged operations and led to prosecutions, making him a permanent target. The man born in 1919 had lived through nearly a century of American history, much of it in the criminal underworld. His unique position as the highest-ranking Asian American in the Chicago outfit was now a footnote to his survival story. Years passed, and Tokyo Joe remained alive despite the price on his head. He had outlived many of the men who once commanded him and survived those who tried to kill him. But eventually, time accomplishes what bullets could not. Ken Eto died on January 23, 2004, of natural causes at the age of 84. The man known as Tokyo Joe had survived an assassination attempt that defied all odds, cooperated with federal authorities against one of America's most dangerous crime families, and lived long enough to see a new century. His life story encompassed the rise of Asian American involvement in organized crime, the violent realities of mob justice, and the extraordinary circumstances that sometimes allow people to survive the unsurvivable. 3 bullets to the head should have ended his story in 1983. Instead, he lived another 21 years. Ken Eto's legacy remains that of the Chicago outfit's highest-ranking Asian American member and the informant who became legendary not for what he did, but for what he survived. In the annals of true crime, few stories are as improbable as the man they couldn't kill.